Hey guys, how's it going? This is Watch, and here we're going to be taking a look at my top 3 Android Wear devices. Specifically, we're going to be taking out the LG R Watch, the Moto 360, and the Sony Smartwatch 3. Now, currently there are a lot of other smartwatches and Android Wear devices out there, but I think if you're interested in Android Wear, I think these 3 have something special to offer for each individual unique need. So let's take a look at all 3 of these devices and see which one is right for you. Now, looking at all 3 smartwatches side by side, you can see that the Moto 360 and the LG R are very similar in terms of overall dimensions and form factor. They're both circular formation smartwatches compared to the more rectangular kind of design on the Smartwatch 3. They're pretty much actually identical in terms of diameter, measuring about 46 millimeters on the Moto 360 and about 46.4 millimeters on the LG R watch. The Smartwatch 3, on the other hand, measures about 36 millimeters in terms of its width and about 51 millimeters in terms of its height. Looking at the profiles of all 3 watches, you can see that the Sony Smartwatch 3 is just a bit lighter and thinner than most of the other smartwatches that you can find out there. And specifically when you have the Sony Smartwatch 3 on your wrist, it does feel a little bit lighter and overall thinner compared to the other 2. Now, in terms of build quality, they're all pretty much made out of really high quality metal components. The Moto 360 and the LG are specifically made out of an aluminum chassis, as well as the Sony Smartwatch 3 is a mixture between polycarbonate plastics and a lot of metal components. They're all very durable and very well made. The glass on front of the screens, they're all scratch and shatter resistant, so they're going to be pretty resilient to most of the circumstances that you're going to come across in your day-to-day usage. In terms of the design, I do have to say personally, I do like the design and look of the Moto 360. I really like how clean it is, how minimalistic it is, and there's really not too much you can really fault it on in terms of design, so a big plus there. In terms of the LG R watch, it kind of goes for a more outdoorsman, sporting kind of look, which again looks pretty nice, but it really depends if you kind of want to go for that look. The Sony Smartwatch 3 is a more contemporary, rectangular, traditional smartwatch design. It's again very nice in terms of overall form factor, and I like the overall kind of body shape that it has. Now, one thing to be said about the design of the Smartwatch 3 is that it's integrated really well with the new wrist strap that it comes with, which is a nice rubberized soft touch strap that actually integrates right into the smartwatch, and you can actually remove the whole smartwatch component of it and exchange it for a different color or modify it in some way. Unfortunately, you have to buy the straps and this whole band system from Sony. It's not as universally replaceable as what you'd find in the LG R watch or even the Moto 360. So in terms of selection, you're pretty limited compared to the other 2 watch, but I really do like this overall finish. It's probably the most comfortable watch to wear out of the other 3. Of course, there's nothing really wrong about the comfort level of the LG R watch, which comes with a genuine leather strap, or the Moto 360, and of course you can always replace those bands to suit whatever your need is. Now, in terms of the controls, they're all pretty much using the exact same system. All 3 of these watches have one single button that's used for power and standby, and the primary mode of controlling the device is either through the capacitive touchscreen or through the voice command features of the integrated OK Google system that comes built in with every Android Wear device. And in terms of responsiveness and overall recognition of the touch commands and voice commands, I think they're all pretty much equal in that regard. Now, looking at the screens in all 3 of these devices, you can see that the Sony Smartwatch 3 has slightly the largest display, measuring about 1.6 inch. It's a LCD display that has a maximum resolution of 320 by 320 pixels, versus the Moto 360 has a 1.56 inch display that has a resolution of 320 by 290. The LG R watch has the same exact resolution as the Sony Smartwatch 3, but it's obviously in that circular formation. But one big highlight of the LG is that it actually has an OLED display, which I think is kind of the best display you could have in any smartwatch, mainly because of the factor that it is a simpler display that uses a little bit less power, and you do definitely get better color response and vibrancy. But because it's emitting its own light, it can actually selectively turn off different regions of the display while illuminating others. So that's definitely going to be handy in terms of battery performance and the overall usage of the smartwatch, especially if you don't want to turn on the backlight. So in terms of the overall screen quality, therefore, I do have to give it to the LG R watch for having the best screen. Now, that being said, there is one factor of Android Wear not being fully optimized and designed for circular devices such as the LG and the Moto 360. If you take a look at some apps that are being developed for a more rectangular screen, the Sony Smartwatch 3 definitely will be fully optimized for those kind of displays, but there are areas where sometimes you get less available information on those circular devices, and it's literally cut off because they don't have corners. But that's not a real big issue that you're going to have a huge problem with for notifications and things like that, but you are missing some information that's being displayed in the OS that you can't actually physically see, even if you have a lot of resolution to display it at. Moving on, in terms of sensors, all three watches have gyroscopes and accelerometer. I think the accelerometer on the LG R watch is a little bit more responsive than some of the others. It actually responds a little bit quicker to me flicking my wrist to wake up the screen compared to the Moto 360 and even the Sony Smartwatch 3. Furthermore, both the Moto 360 and the LG have a heart rate monitor, which is excellent if you do a lot of activities and you want to measure your heart rate off the fly, or even just measure your heart rate in terms of baseline levels. And all three of them have pedometers, so they track your running and walking activities, which is quite excellent. So very similar. The only difference is the Sony doesn't have a heart rate monitor. Now, when we take a look at the internal performance on all three devices, you can see that they're pretty much fairly similar in terms of most regards. Now, we do have more powerful processors on the LG and the Sony. They're pretty much using the same ARM A7 quad-core chip, which is clocked at about 1.2 gigahertz with 512 megabytes of RAM. The Moto 360 is using a little bit more of an underpowered CPU. It's basically using a Texas Instruments 1 gigahertz single core processor, but it does have 512 megabytes of RAM. Now, in terms of day-to-day usage, I do find that the Moto 360 definitely is not as fast and as fluid as the other two smartwatches, and certainly that lack of internal horsepower that is needed to power Android Wear is a little bit missing compared to what you would find in the other two devices. Now, obviously, you can live with it on a day-to-day basis, but once you start using the LG and the Sony Smartwatch 3, you do get kind of accustomed to their fluidity and speed, and going back to the Moto 360, it is noticeably different in terms of the overall performance. Now, when it comes to connectivity, all three devices use the same interface of Bluetooth and NFC to connect to your Android device, and unfortunately, based on the fact that they are Android Wear devices, they can only really work with Android-based mobile platforms, so whether that be a smartphone or a tablet. If you have an iOS device, unfortunately, you're going to have to take a look at the Pebble or the Apple smartwatch. Now, one of the final things that we're going to talk about is probably one of the most important things about buying any smartwatch, and that definitely has to do with battery performance. Now, in terms of battery capacity, we have 410 milliamp hours on the LG, 420 milliamp hours on the Sony, and the Moto 360 has 320 milliamp hours. Now, certainly when you're talking about battery life, everything really depends upon your usage and how many notifications you get in a given time frame. But based on my day-to-day usage on all three of these devices, I managed at least a day to 2 days on the Sony, about a day to a day and a half on the LG R watch, and less than a day, about 12 hours at best on the Moto 360. Now, the Moto 360 is certainly the worst performing smartwatch out there right now in terms of battery life, which is really unfortunate. Now, it really depends upon how many notifications you can get, but if you are a heavy user, you're going to kind of struggle to get through the day on the Moto 360, versus you're really not going to have any issues whatsoever on the other two. But that being said, of course, one of the cool things about the Moto 360 is that it has an excellent charging dock that is basically using the induction protection technology that comes with it. The LG also comes with a magnetic dock as well. The Sony, unfortunately, you do have to put in a micro USB cable, which is definitely not as cool and as convenient as the other two. And that's really it. I think that'll cover most of the basis of what any smartwatch should be kind of governed at right now. In terms of pricing, obviously the pricing always change. There's different sales. The LG currently right now is the most expensive at about $300 versus $250 on the Sony and the Moto 360, but obviously that could change later down the road. So generally speaking, definitely take a look at all of the pros and cons of each smartwatch, and based on your personal needs and preferences in terms of design and overall features, definitely go out there and get your hands on these smartwatches and make your decision from there. Hopefully this video gives you some kind of insight on how they kind of feel side by side and what the different advantages and disadvantages of each of them are. But if you like the video, please make sure to give us a thumbs up. That really helps us out tremendously. If you haven't subscribed to MW Technology, definitely make sure to do so, because we have a ton of comparisons with smartwatches, smartphones, tablets, you name it. In terms of tech, we pretty much have it. So definitely check back to our channel if you're interested in cool reviews and comparisons. And thank you so much again for watching. We'll see you later. Take care.